right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. There was a story this morning that was I never heard this kind of a story before. There was a couple out in Yellowstone National Park. The young guy, fell into one of the springs, and the spring's like 200 something degrees Fahrenheit, and it's very very acidic. So he fell into the water. She went to get help. They couldn't get him. They saw his body, but they couldn't get him out. It was getting to be dark. So the next morning they went out there. All they found was his wallet and his shoes. They say he dissolved. They say the acid was so intense. And I was thinking, okay, now that we have this story out, this is where all murderers are going to bring the bodies.
Exactly.
We're going to bring them all to this hot spring, and there'll be no evidence. In our next interview, we have a fictional story where there is a body, and it's not exactly clear who it is. Kay Kendall is the author, and the book is called Rainy Day Women. It's an Austin Starr mystery novel, and it says here that Kay is an historian, an animal rescuer. Wow, I love that part. I'm going to find out about that. And then, of course, an award-winning author as well. Rainy Day Women is the book. Kay Kendall, good morning, Kay.
Good morning. How are you?
Pretty good. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Houston, Texas.
Houston. And how's the weather in Houston today?
It's great. It's balmy. I think Texas and Florida can relate.
Yes, I think so. I know that the Rockies right now have snow. Did you see that?
Yes. I have a friend there who was saying they'd had this incredible warm fall, but the freeze was coming, and I guess it's there now.
So we are just discovering Austin Starr for the first time. How long have you been writing about Austin Starr?
I have 2 books on Austin Starr. The first one came out in 2013 called Desolation Row, and Rainy Day Women came out a year ago. People of a certain age or fans of Bob Dylan may recognize the song titles. They are from Bob Dylan, and it's to signify that my books are set in the late 60s.
Oh, neat. So Rainy Day Women, what was the other title?
Desolation Row.
Oh, I don't remember that title by Dylan. Oh, wow. So that's what you're doing. Is that going to be the theme for a while?
Yes. I love history. I love reading historical mysteries, and when I decided to write my own, I wanted to take a chaotic time period that was not written too much about, like World War I and World War II. There weren't empty niches there, but I thought I'll take the 60s and look at it. I'll put a heroine in there who's kind of an ordinary gal, not a radical, not reacting against, just trying to make her way through a chaotic decade. And she's young, and she's trying to come to terms with the world as she finds it. And bodies keep falling in front of her, and she's curious, and she becomes an amateur sleuth and tries to figure out who's killing people.
Wow.
But I do love how your story goes between the different lives of women who are... You have one that's a graduate student, and you have one that's a streetwalker, and you really do a lot of investigation into their past.
I love it. It's just a lot of fun. And I also have, when I was growing up, the Holocaust, the memory of the Holocaust was a big, big deal. I can't remember when I didn't know about the Holocaust and the horrors of it. And I put survivors in there, and I had to try really hard for them as characters not to take over the middle of the book.
Exactly.
We met a Holocaust survivor, and I was amazed how her attitude was so joyful and cheerful. And she showed us the tattoo on her, was it her wrist? I remember seeing the number, and it was like, oh my gosh! After all that, and you've lived your life, and you're just as joyful as can be. So as you're writing, you're going into that world. Do you like being in that world as a writer?
I like it very much. I'm writing on a different time period right now. I'm writing about Austin Starr's grandmother. But when I was back in the 60s, I honestly felt like half of my days were spent in the late 1960s. And I would do, guest posts on people's blogs, and then the readers would ask me questions, and they would say things like, well, how do you keep your book in the 60s, and what's hard about writing that historical period.
Yeah.
And because I was also a young woman during that time, and because I think historically, it was real easy. I mean, I can remember running around looking for a payphone and trying to find a dime.
Me too. Me too. Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. And also, I didn't want to get bogged down in the details of crime, the CSI stuff. I wanted to keep it more on motive and people and their emotions. And so if you go back to when it was more people sleuthing and less on technology, then if you go back a couple of decades, you can focus on that. And so
that's interesting. So for your own research, did you use the internet or did you go to the library?
Oh, I have to confess, I used the internet, and I bought a bunch of books that were kind of like Life magazine books with pictures, so I could remember fine details about the clothes. I have a lot of fringe in the book, and my heroine carries a macrame purse.
There you go.
Do you incorporate your animal rescue interests at all in the storyline?
No, I don't. In the third book that I'm writing, that's set in the Roaring '20s, I tried to incorporate. There's a dog, there's a beagle puppy, and I tried to put in a rescued rabbit, which is what my husband and I do, is rescue rabbits. And my writing group said, Kay, and I knew I couldn't pull it off. It was too much. So the rabbit had to go away. But there is somebody in my writing group who definitely wants me to have a rabbit in a book someday. And I'd like that.
I have to ask this question. How do you find distressed rabbits to rescue? Well, how does that happen?
Well, the main thing is people get them for Easter and they think they're cute, and then they go away.
Yeah.
And they either throw them into the yard and think they can cope, and they can't. And somebody finds them and rescues them, or somebody finds them and takes them to a shelter.
I gotcha.
The third most given up animal to all American shelters after dogs and cats is rabbits.
Wow.
So there are a lot of rabbits out there, and they make wonderful pets.
You've given law enforcement a challenge in your book also, because that's sort of a very, very quiet town, and the word murder just never entered into their vocabulary.
Yes, that's right. It's, but it's around, and people do kill other people. And the books that I like the best are not the evil people committing murders, because where's the, that's, why need to, if you're bad, you're going to do something bad. But it's kind of people in the middle who get pushed by circumstances, who act out or do something bad. And that's where I think I like to find the drama.
The one that we're talking about, or trying to talk about, we need to be a little bit more fair to the book, I think, before we say goodbye. The book is called Rainy Day Women. Give us a thumbnail sketch of the story.
Okay. This is a woman in her 20s who's married to a young man, her college sweetheart. It's set in 1969. And he becomes a draft resistor, and she follows her husband to Canada. The first book, he gets jailed for a murder he didn't commit, and that's how she becomes an amateur sleuth. She proves he didn't do it. Second book, she's had a baby, and a good friend of hers in Canada gets accused of a murder in a women's liberation group. And she's never gone to a women's lib meeting, but she goes and tries to find suspects there, and she finds out about women's lib. And so she has to go across the country and take her baby to Seattle, Washington, and Vancouver, British Columbia, and she finds this new world. So it reeks of the 60s, but it tries to be in the middle. So it's just this ordinary woman making her way in these fraught, exciting times.
This past week we had Leonard Cohen and Leon Russell both pass away, and I think I went back to the 60s remembering their music a little bit, so yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Gosh, I wish we could talk longer. Kay, thank you for being on the air with us today. Go to the website. What is the website, Kay?
It's Austin, AUSTIN, star, STARR, AustinStar.com, and you can find my website. That's it.
Okay, AustinStar.com.
And is that a picture of you in your younger days, in your 1960s days on the cover?
Wow, I wish.
Oh,
Isn't she
okay. She's beautiful.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
I have an eye for women. I agree, but I also like guitars. So I have to admit, my eye keeps going both. I'm like torn. Do I look at the girl? Do I look at the guitar? I love the guitar too.
Well, she's loving that guitar, so what more could you ask for?
Kay Kendall, thank you so much for being on the air. Good luck with the book, and come back anytime.
I'd love to. Thank you so much.
That was
Happy weekend.
That was a fun one. Thank you. We'll be